The nightmare began 3 weeks ago, though you did not recognize it as such at first. Dreams have always been strange in the underhive where you make your home, 8 kilometers beneath the surface of a hive world whose name you barely remember learning in the schola. Everyone dreams down here, where the air is thick with recycled breath and the taste of rust, where the only light comes from failing lumens that flicker like dying stars. Your dreams were different, though. They showed you places you had never been, faces you had never seen, events that had not yet happened, but somehow felt more real than the crumbling hab block where your family has lived for 6 generations. You tried to dismiss them as nothing more than the products of an overactive imagination. The kind of mental wandering that happens when you work 16-hour shifts in the manufactorum and sleep only 4 hours before starting again. Everyone has strange thoughts down here. The mind plays tricks when exhausted, when malnourished, when breathing air that has been filtered through the same atmospheric processes for 300 years. But the dreams grew stronger. They became visions that intruded into your waking hours, flashes of insight that struck you without warning while you operated your machine on the assembly line. You would see a component failure before it happened. You would know when the shift supervisor was approaching before you heard his footsteps. You would sense the emotional states of those around you with uncomfortable clarity, feeling their fear and desperation as if they were your own. For a time, you convinced yourself these were simply the products of pattern recognition, the unconscious mind processing information and presenting conclusions in ways that felt supernatural but were actually perfectly rational. Humans have always sought meaning in coincidence, have always attributed mundane occurrences to mystical causes. You were not special, you were not different, you were just another laborer in an imperium of trillions, another cog in the vast machinery that kept civilization functioning. These reassurances worked until the day your younger sister fell on the landing outside your family's apartment, her knee split open on the jagged edge of a rusted grate that should have been replaced decades ago. You ran to her as she screamed, blood streaming down her leg, mixing with the perpetual dampness of the underhive's atmosphere. Your mother was at work. Your father had been dead for 3 years, his lungs finally giving out after decades of breathing the manufactorum's toxic fumes. There was no one else to help, no medici station within kilometers, no easy way to stop the bleeding from the deep gash that exposed bone and muscle. You grabbed her, pressed your hands against the wound, and wished with every fiber of your being that you could make the pain stop, that you could heal her, that you could undo the damage and return her to the laughing child she had been moments before. And then your hands began to glow with a pale golden light that seemed to come from somewhere beyond the material world. The flesh knit itself together under your touch. The blood stopped flowing. The bone sealed, and the muscle regenerated, and the skin closed over the wound as if it had never been opened at all. Your sister's screaming stopped, replaced by stunned silence as she stared at her healed leg, then at your hands, then at your face. She looked at you with wonder and awe, seeing you as a miracle worker, a healer touched by the Emperor's grace. But you felt only terror so profound it threatened to stop your hearts, because you knew what you had done. You knew what you had become. You were a psyker, a witch, a mutant, whose very existence was an abomination in the eyes of the Imperium you had been taught to revere since childhood. The Imperium of man spans 1 million worlds and uncounted billions of human souls, a galactic empire so vast that its true scale defies human comprehension. Among those billions, psykers are born with increasing frequency, individuals gifted or cursed depending on your perspective, with abilities that allow them to manipulate the immaterial energy of the warp. These powers manifest in countless ways. Some psykers can read minds or project their thoughts across vast distances. Others can move objects with thought alone, manipulate fire or electricity, heal wounds, or inflict them without touching their victims. A rare few can glimpse possible futures or reach back into the past to witness events long forgotten. The variety of psychic manifestations is as diverse as humanity itself, each psyker unique in the specific nature and strength of their abilities. In another age, in another civilization, you might have been celebrated. Ancient cultures across thousands of worlds once venerated their psykers as shamans, wise women, prophets, and miracle workers. Some primitive societies scattered across the galaxy's fringes still maintain these traditions, treating their psykers as sacred individuals whose abilities mark them as chosen by the gods or spirits they worship. But the Imperium knows a truth that these primitive peoples do not understand or choose to ignore. Every psyker is a liability, a weakness in the fabric of reality, a potential doorway through which the horrors of the warp might pour into the material universe. The Imperium is not empty space or peaceful void. It is a roiling ocean of psychic energy, inhabited by entities of malevolent intelligence and incomprehensible power. Demons lurk in that realm beyond reality, constantly seeking ways to breach the barrier and manifest in the material world, where they can wreak havoc and feed upon the suffering of mortal beings. An untrained psyker is a beacon in the warp, shining like a lighthouse to every predator that dwells in that nightmare realm. Your abilities, no matter how minor they might seem, create a connection between your consciousness and the Imperium that demons can sense and potentially exploit. If your will weakens, if your control slips, if fear or anger or despair overwhelm your defenses, one of these entities might use you as an anchor point, possessing your body and using it as a gateway to drag itself into real space. The results of such possession are invariably catastrophic. A possessed psyker might slaughter everyone around them before the corruption can be stopped. They might tear open a permanent rift between realities, allowing an endless stream of demons to pour through. In the worst cases, entire worlds have been consumed by warp storms triggered by a single psyker losing control at the wrong moment. The Imperium has witnessed these catastrophes repeatedly over its 10,000-year history. It has seen hive cities turned into charnel houses when a rogue psyker accidentally summoned a demonic incursion. It has watched entire planetary populations reduced to gibbering madness when a particularly powerful untrained psyker tore a hole in reality. It has fought wars lasting centuries to reclaim worlds that fell to chaos because one person with psychic abilities accepted a demon's promises of power. These experiences have taught the Imperium's leaders that psykers cannot be tolerated in the general population. They must be found, collected, controlled, and either trained to serve the Emperor or eliminated before they can become threats. There are no exceptions to this rule. There is no appeal from the judgment. Every psyker must be accounted for, and their fate determined by those with the authority and knowledge to make such decisions. The law is absolute and has been since the Emperor himself walked among humanity. Every imperial world must surrender its psykers to the Adeptus Astra Telepathica, the ancient organization responsible for finding, collecting, and processing individuals with psychic abilities. This surrender is not voluntary. It is a tithe, a tax paid in human souls, as mandatory and rigorously enforced as any other obligation a world owes to the Imperium. To hide a psyker is heresy. To refuse to deliver them when the black ships arrive is treason. To attempt to train or utilize psykers without proper Imperial authorization is an offense punishable by death for the individuals involved, and potentially exterminatus for the entire world. The Imperium does not make idle threats on this matter. Worlds that have failed to comply with the psyker tithe have been burned from orbit, their populations exterminated to the last child, entire civilizations reduced to ash and radioactive slag as examples to others who might consider defiance. You know all of this. Every citizen of the Imperium knows it, taught from earliest childhood that the witch must burn, that the psyker is unclean, that those touched by the warp are to be feared and reported to the authorities immediately. The propaganda is relentless and pervasive, woven into every prayer and sermon, reinforced in schools and workplaces, displayed on every public bulletin and broadcast. Images of demons tearing through possessed psykers are common in Imperial art, reminders of what happens when the unclean are allowed to live among the righteous. Stories of heroes who expose psykers in their communities are told to children as moral lessons. The message is clear and has been repeated so many times it has become fundamental to Imperial culture. Psykers are dangerous. Psykers are abominations. Psykers must be destroyed or controlled. There is no middle ground. And now you are one of them. The realization settles over you like a shroud, cold and suffocating. Your sister is looking at you with awe, but you know that awe will turn to fear once she understands what you have done, once she comprehends that the miracle she witnessed was actually heresy made manifest. You tell her not to speak of this to anyone, make her swear on the Emperor's name that she will keep the secret, and she agrees because she loves you and does not yet understand the magnitude of what has happened. But you know the secret cannot be kept for long. Your mother will see the healed leg and ask questions. Neighbors may have witnessed the light that emanated from your hands. Word will spread through the underhive with the speed of wildfire, and once the rumors begin, the authorities will come. The Arbites will arrive with their shock mauls and combat shotguns. They will take you into custody. They will hold you in a secure facility designed to contain psykers until the black ships arrive to collect their tithe. And then your real nightmare will begin. You have perhaps hours, maybe days if you are fortunate, before discovery becomes inevitable. Some psykers in your position attempt to flee, abandoning their families and disappearing into the depths of the underhive, where the authorities' reach is weakest. A few even succeed in remaining hidden for years, living as fugitives in the spaces between civilization, constantly moving to avoid detection. But most are found eventually, hunted down by specialists trained in locating rogue psykers and brought to justice for the crime of trying to escape their fate. Others choose a different path, turning themselves in before they are discovered, hoping that cooperation might earn them some measure of mercy in whatever comes next. You do not yet know which choice you will make. You know only that the life you knew has ended, that the person you were has died, and that whatever future awaits you will be defined entirely by the accident of your birth and the deadly gifts it has given you. The hunt, detection, and capture. The imperial tithe is one of the fundamental pillars upon which the Imperium of man is built, a vast system of taxation and resource extraction that spans every human world, from the densest hive cities to the most isolated agricultural colonies. Every planet that claims the Emperor's protection, every world that benefits from the Imperium's military might and the order it imposes across the galaxy, must pay for these privileges. The tithe takes many forms, depending on each world's resources and capabilities. Agricultural worlds pay in grain and livestock, feeding the populations of planets that cannot produce their own food. Industrial worlds pay in manufactured goods, weapons, vehicles, and raw materials extracted from their mines and refineries. Military worlds pay in soldiers, regiments of the Astra Militarum raised from their populations and sent to fight in wars across the galaxy, men and women who will never see their homes again. But there is one form of tithe that every world must pay, regardless of its classification or resources. One obligation that admits no exceptions and tolerates no shortfalls. The psyker tithe. Every imperial world must identify and surrender every individual within its population who manifests psychic abilities. The number varies from world to world depending on population size and the local rate of psychic manifestation, but the requirement is absolute. When the black ships arrive to collect their cargo, the planetary governor must present every psyker who has been identified since the last collection. There are no exemptions except for specific protected categories. Navigators, those rare mutants whose third eye allows them to perceive the warp and guide ships through its treacherous currents, belong to ancient houses that have served the Imperium since before the Horus heresy and are not subject to the tithe. Space Marine librarians are recruited directly by the Adeptus Astartes from their own pools of aspirants and trained according to each chapter's traditions. For everyone else, there is no escape. The responsibility for collecting and delivering psykers falls upon the planetary governor, and it is a duty taken with deadly seriousness throughout the Imperium. Failure to meet the psyker tithe is one of the few offenses that can result in immediate execution of a governor and imposition of a new regime by force. The Imperium does not accept excuses. If a governor claims that no psykers have manifested on their world, Inquisitors will be dispatched to verify the claim. If hidden psykers are discovered, if the tithe has been deliberately withheld or understated, the consequences are catastrophic. The governor and their entire bloodline may be executed. The world itself may face exterminatus if the Inquisition determines that corruption has taken root in the planetary leadership. The message has been repeated across 10 millennia of imperial history, carved in the ashes of worlds that failed to comply. The psyker tithe must be paid, always, without exception, without delay. The methods used to identify and capture psykers vary enormously across the Imperium's million worlds, reflecting differences in technology, culture, and the specific challenges each society faces. On highly developed worlds with sophisticated surveillance networks and extensive imperial infrastructure, the process can be relatively organized and efficient. These worlds employ sanctioned psykers already in imperial service, individuals who have undergone training and soul-binding, and now work for local branches of the Adeptus Administratum or Adeptus Arbites. These psychic specialists can sense disturbances in the warp, detecting the ripples created when an untrained psyker manifests their abilities for the first time or loses control in a moment of stress or emotion. The sensation is distinct and unmistakable to anyone trained to recognize it, like feeling a sudden drop in temperature or smelling smoke on the wind. Once a psychic manifestation has been detected, the authorities move quickly to locate and apprehend the individual responsible. Surveillance systems are reviewed to identify people who were present at the location when the disturbance occurred. Informant networks are activated, offering rewards to anyone who provides information about unusual occurrences or individuals behaving strangely. Sanctioned psykers might be deployed to sweep the affected area, using their abilities to narrow down possible suspects. When the target is identified, enforcement teams are dispatched to make the arrest. These teams are specially trained and equipped for dealing with psykers, carrying null-field generators that suppress psychic activity within a limited radius, wielding blessed weapons, blessed by priests, and inscribed with wards against warp spawn, and most importantly, having authority to use lethal force if the target resists or shows signs of demonic possession. The arrests are conducted with overwhelming force and no warning. The teams arrive in the middle of the night or during work hours, smashing through doors, securing the area, and taking the target into custody within minutes. There is no opportunity for resistance, no chance to flee, no possibility of negotiation. You are identified as a psyker. You are a threat to everyone around you. You will be taken into custody for the safety of the Imperium and processing by the appropriate authorities. These are not requests or suggestions. They are statements of fact, backed by the full authority of the Adeptus Terra, and enforced by individuals who will not hesitate to kill you if you do not comply immediately. Family members who attempt to interfere are restrained or arrested themselves for obstructing imperial justice. Neighbors who protest are warned that their objections border on heresy. The message is clear. The Imperium has come for one of its own, and nothing and no one will be allowed to interfere. On less developed worlds, the process is often cruder, but no less effective in achieving its goals. Many imperial worlds lack the infrastructure for sophisticated psychic detection, relying instead on the most basic and brutal method available for finding hidden threats within their populations: the witch hunt. When signs of psychic activity are reported, whether by concerned citizens, zealous priests, or local authorities who have noticed unusual occurrences, the response is immediate and overwhelming. The affected area is cordoned off and everyone within it becomes a suspect. Interrogations are conducted, often under torture or the threat thereof, as investigators attempt to identify the source of the disturbance. Sanctioned psykers or priests, trained in detecting the signs of warp taint, examine suspects one by one, looking for the telltale markers that indicate psychic ability or demonic influence. The process is imperfect and frequently results in false accusations. Individuals who are innocent of any psychic manifestation, but who have enemies within their community, may find themselves denounced as witches based on fabricated evidence or malicious rumors. People who exhibit unusual behavior due to mental illness or physical disability may be mistaken for psykers by investigators who lack the training to distinguish between genuine psychic activity and mundane medical conditions. Some worlds have experienced purges, where hundreds or even thousands of people were executed based on confessions extracted through torture or mass hysteria that caused entire communities to turn on their neighbors in paroxysms of fear and religious fervor. The Imperium views these excesses as regrettable but acceptable costs of maintaining security. Better to kill 100 innocents than allow a single genuine psyker to remain hidden and potentially trigger a catastrophe that could kill millions. When a genuine psyker is identified through these methods, the capture is no less brutal than on more developed worlds. You are seized by local enforcers, militia, or even angry mobs who have been whipped into religious fervor by preachers denouncing the witch in their midst. You are dragged from your home or workplace, bound with chains or ropes, subjected to beatings and abuse by those who see you as an abomination that deserves only death. If you are fortunate, the local authorities will intervene before the mob can kill you, recognizing that you are valuable property that must be delivered to the black ships rather than wasted in an impromptu execution. If you are less fortunate, you may be subjected to torture in misguided attempts to drive out the evil that possesses you, or to extract confessions about other psykers who might be hiding in the community. The logic of such torture is circular and insane. If you confess under duress, you prove your guilt. But if you maintain your innocence despite escalating pain, you prove that you are strong enough to resist, and therefore even more dangerous than suspected. Some planetary governors take a more proactive and systematic approach to the psyker tithe, implementing programs designed to identify psychic potential before it fully manifests. On these worlds, children undergo regular screening for psychic abilities as part of their education or medical care. The testing methods vary depending on available technology and expertise, ranging from crude proximity tests with known psykers to sophisticated psychometric instruments that can detect minute fluctuations in the warp's influence on an individual's consciousness. Those who show even the slightest hint of psychic potential are flagged for enhanced surveillance, their lives monitored carefully by authorities who watch for signs that their latent abilities are beginning to emerge. When manifestation finally occurs, as it almost always does for those carrying the psychic gene, the response is immediate. There is no opportunity to hide or flee because the system has already identified you as a threat and has been waiting for this moment. These proactive systems often result in higher numbers of psykers in the tithe, catching individuals whose powers might never have fully developed if left unmonitored. A child who might have lived their entire life experiencing only vague intuitions or unusually vivid dreams becomes a confirmed psyker when stressed by the knowledge that they are being watched for signs of manifestation. The pressure creates a self-fulfilling prophecy, triggering the very abilities that the monitoring was meant to detect. The Imperium considers this an acceptable outcome. Better to collect a dozen borderline psykers who might never have become threats than to miss a single powerful individual who could destroy an entire city if their abilities manifested uncontrollably. The mathematics of risk management in a galaxy where a single possessed psyker can kill millions admit no room for mercy or second guessing. Regardless of the specific methods employed, the result is always the same. You are identified as a psyker. You are taken into custody by local authorities who recognize you as valuable and dangerous in equal measure. You are transported to a secure holding facility, usually operated by the Adeptus Arbites or local planetary defense forces under the oversight of the Adeptus Astra Telepathica. These facilities exist on every Imperial world, maintained in constant readiness to receive psykers identified within the population. They range from purpose-built fortresses with sophisticated containment systems on wealthy worlds to little more than reinforced dungeons in the basements of government buildings on poorer planets. The common feature across all of them is their focus on a single purpose: preventing escape and containing any manifestations of psychic power until the black ships arrive to collect their cargo. The cells where you are held are designed with both physical and psychic security in mind. The walls are thick, constructed from materials selected for their resistance to psychic influence, or covered in warding symbols that cause discomfort to those who touch the warp. Armed guards maintain constant vigilance, their training emphasizing the importance of never allowing themselves to be caught alone with a psyker, and always maintaining lines of sight with their partners to prevent subtle psychic manipulation from going undetected. Some facilities employ blanks or nulls, individuals born without souls who project a psychic void that suppresses the abilities of nearby psykers as additional security. The presence of these soulless humans is deeply disturbing to anyone with psychic sensitivity, their existence registering as a hole in reality that causes instinctive revulsion and unease. You are given minimal food and water, enough to sustain life but not comfort. Medical care is provided only for injuries or illnesses that threaten your survival, as the authorities need you alive for transfer to the black ships. You are allowed no contact with family or friends, no opportunity to send messages or receive visitors. You exist in isolation, sharing your captivity only with other psykers held in adjacent cells. Their fear and despair bleeding through the walls in psychic emanations you cannot help but sense. The conditions are deliberately harsh, designed to keep you weakened and off balance, less likely to manifest your abilities in escape attempts or resistance. The authorities justify this harshness as necessary for security, but there is also an element of punishment in the treatment. You are a psyker, an abomination, a threat to everyone around you. Why should you be treated with dignity or compassion when your very existence endangers billions? The waiting begins. Days stretch into weeks, weeks into months, and the psychological toll mounts with each passing hour. You have no information about when the black ships will arrive. You are given no updates about your status or future. You simply exist in your cell, counting heartbeats or scratch marks on the wall, trying to maintain sanity in an environment designed to break your spirit. Some prisoners succumb to madness, their minds fragmenting under the isolation and fear. Others become violent, lashing out with their powers in desperate attempts to escape or simply from frustration at their circumstances. These outbursts are met with overwhelming force. Guards rush in with shock mauls and null field generators, beating you into submission, sometimes killing you if you are deemed too dangerous to contain. The other prisoners sense these incidents through the walls, their terror spiking as they realize how easily any of them could be the next to lose control and face similar treatment. And then one day, without warning or announcement, the routine changes. The guards become more alert, moving with greater urgency. You hear sounds of heavy equipment being moved and orders being shouted in the corridors beyond your cell. Other prisoners are being taken from their cells, marched away in chains towards some destination you cannot see. The psychic pressure in the facility spikes as fear spreads through the population, everyone simultaneously realizing what is happening. The black ships have arrived. Your wait is over. The next phase of your nightmare is about to begin. The black ships arrive. The black ships are unlike any other vessels in the Imperium's vast fleets, specialized craft designed for a single dark purpose that sets them apart from the warships, transports, and trading vessels that ply the void between stars. They are massive constructions, many dating back thousands of years to the early days of the Imperium, maintained and preserved by the Adeptus Mechanicus, with religious devotion befitting their sacred function. Each ship is kilometers in length, a vast floating city of black metal and Gothic architecture that dwarfs most military vessels. They do not announce their arrival with fanfare or ceremony. They simply appear at the edges of star systems, emerging from the warp in ripples of reality that mark all transitions from the immaterium to real space, and begin their slow, deliberate approach toward the worlds whose psyker tithes they have come to collect. The hulls of the black ships are constructed from a special alloy, a psychically resistant metal whose exact composition is a closely guarded secret known only to the highest-ranking tech priests of Mars. This material gives the vessels their distinctive black appearance and serves a vital function in containing and suppressing the psychic emanations from the thousands of psykers held within their cargo bays. The metal itself seems to drink in light rather than reflecting it, making the ships appear as pieces of void cut from space itself, moving shadows against the stars that create an almost visceral sense of wrongness in those who observe them. Every surface is covered in layers of warding symbols, protective runes, and defensive sigils that have been inscribed, painted, or welded onto the hull over centuries of service. These symbols are not merely decorative. They are functional elements of the ship's psychic defenses, maintained by priests whose entire lives are devoted to renewing and strengthening these wards. To observe a black ship with normal human senses is to see an impressive, if ominous, vessel, but to perceive it with psychic abilities is to witness something far more disturbing. The ships radiate anti-psychic energy, their very presence in the warp appearing as a void or negation that repels attempts to touch them with powers drawn from the immaterium. Psykers who sense the approaching ships report feelings of dread and revulsion, as if something fundamentally wrong is drawing near. Navigators whose third eyes allow them to perceive the currents of the warp describe the black ships as moving blind spots, areas where the normal flows of psychic energy are disrupted or nullified entirely. This property makes the ships uniquely suited for their purpose, providing multiple layers of containment for cargo that would be impossibly dangerous to transport in any conventional vessel. The black ships are heavily armed, mounting weapons comparable to those found on frontline military cruisers and battleships. This armament is necessary because the cargo they carry makes them enormously valuable targets for forces throughout the galaxy. Chaos warbands would pay almost any price to capture a black ship intact, seizing the thousands of psykers aboard to use as raw material for their dark rituals, as sacrifices to their demonic patrons, or as recruits to be corrupted and turned into servants of the ruinous powers. The Dark Eldar view black ships as treasure troves beyond price, each psyker worth many times more than normal captives for feeding the thirsting city of Komorach that exists within the webway. Even conventional pirates and renegades recognize the potential profit in capturing such vessels, whether to ransom their cargo back to the Imperium or to sell psykers to less scrupulous buyers across the galaxy. For these reasons, black ships almost never travel alone. They are accompanied by escorts drawn from the Imperial Navy, squadrons of cruisers and destroyers whose sole purpose is ensuring the black ships reach their destinations safely. These escorts are typically drawn from naval forces stationed near Terra or from regional fleets that have been granted the sacred duty of protecting the psyker tithes. The crews of escort vessels understand the critical importance of their mission and take their responsibilities with appropriate seriousness. They know that failure could result not only in the loss of valuable cargo, but potentially in that cargo being turned against the Imperium by enemies who would eagerly use captured psykers for their own purposes. The standing orders for escort commanders are explicit. If a black ship is in danger of being captured, it must be destroyed along with all hands, rather than allowed to fall into enemy possession. This is not a decision any captain makes lightly. but it is one they must be prepared to make if circumstances require. The crews of the black ships themselves are unlike those serving aboard any other Imperial vessels. The demands of their duty require individuals of extraordinary mental fortitude and specific characteristics that set them apart from normal spaces. The most important members of the crew are the Sisters of Silence, the legendary witch hunters who have served the Imperium since the days of the Great Crusade. These women are all blanks, individuals born without souls in the conventional sense, their presence in the warp appearing as voids rather than the normal glow of human consciousness. This quality makes them immune to psychic powers and deeply disturbing to psykers, whose abilities are nullified or severely weakened in their presence. Their very existence seems wrong to anyone with psychic sensitivity, triggering instinctive revulsion and terror that no amount of rational thought can fully overcome. The Sisters of Silence serve as the primary security force aboard the black ships, responsible for preventing escapes, maintaining order among the prisoners, and intervening when psykers lose control or show signs of demonic possession. They are highly trained warriors, experts in close combat and the use of specialized weapons designed specifically for fighting psykers and the demons that sometimes manifest during psychic incidents. Their signature weapons are executioner great blades, massive two-handed swords whose edges are inscribed with runes of negation that make them particularly effective against warp-spawned entities. They also carry bolt pistols, flamers, and other armaments suited for dealing with threats both psychic and mundane. Most distinctively, the sisters communicate through an elaborate sign language rather than speech, having taken vows of silence that they maintain throughout their lives. This self-imposed muteness adds to their unsettling presence, making them seem more like living weapons than human beings. The rest of the black ship's crews are normal humans, but not just any humans can serve aboard these vessels. The psychological requirements for such service are stringent and strictly enforced. The ships are suffused with an atmosphere of despair and suffering that permeates every deck and compartment, a psychic miasma created by the thousands of terrified psykers held in the cargo bays. Even individuals with no psychic sensitivity can sense this wrongness on a subconscious level, experiencing it as a constant low-level anxiety, persistent nightmares, intrusive thoughts, or a general sense of malaise that never fully lifts. Crew members must undergo regular psychological evaluations and mandatory rotation periods to prevent them from succumbing to depression or worse. Many suffer from long-term mental health effects, their service aboard the black ships leaving permanent scars that continue to affect them even after they rotate to other duties or retire from service entirely. Despite these hardships, there is no shortage of volunteers for black ship service. The crews are drawn primarily from specific worlds near Terra that have ancient contracts with the Adeptus Astra Telepathica, agreements dating back thousands of years that provide steady supplies of suitable personnel in exchange for exemption from certain imperial tithes. These recruiting worlds maintain specialized training programs that prepare their populations for the unique demands of serving aboard vessels that transport psykers. The training emphasizes mental discipline, resistance to psychic influence, and the ability to function effectively in environments that would break most people within weeks. Those who successfully complete this training and are selected for black ship service receive higher pay than normal Imperial Navy personnel, recognition of the additional risks and psychological burdens their duty entails. The captains and senior officers of the black ships are drawn from the ranks of the Adeptus Astra Telepathica itself, experienced adepts who have risen through the organization's hierarchy to earn these prestigious but demanding positions. They are responsible for navigating the complex circuits of collection that their vessels follow, making decisions about which worlds to visit and in what order based on intelligence about psychic manifestation rates and the urgency of various tithes. They manage the psychological health of their crews, balancing the need to maintain operations against the necessity of preventing their personnel from being broken by constant exposure to suffering. Most importantly, they ensure that every psyker collected is delivered to Terra intact and alive, a requirement that is both absolute and extraordinarily difficult to fulfill given the inherent instability of their cargo. The black ships also frequently carry inquisitors as passengers, members of the Ordos Malleus and Hereticus, who use the vessel's circuits as opportunities to investigate worlds for signs of corruption or heresy. These inquisitors have unlimited authority to examine any aspect of the psyker collection process, to investigate planetary governments for evidence of withheld tithes or corruption, and to requisition any psyker they deem suitable for service to the Inquisition itself. The presence of inquisitors aboard adds another layer of tension to life on a black ship, as even the captain must defer to their authority in matters touching upon their areas of jurisdiction. Some inquisitors are relatively benevolent, treating the crew and prisoners with as much dignity as their duties allow. Others are harsh and demanding, viewing both as resources to be exploited in service to their investigations, with little concern for the human costs involved. When a black ship enters orbit above your world, the planetary governor receives immediate notification through secure channels and must begin preparations to transfer the accumulated psyker tithe. This is a carefully choreographed process that follows protocols refined over millennia of practice. The governor provides manifests listing every psyker in custody, including their approximate age, sex, the nature of their psychic manifestation if known, and any relevant information about their behavior or stability while imprisoned. The captain of the black ship reviews these manifests and issues instructions for the transfer, specifying timelines, locations, and security requirements that must be met for the operation to proceed smoothly. Typically, the psykers are brought to a designated spaceport or landing zone where shuttlecraft from the black ship can collect them safely. The transfer must happen quickly with minimal exposure of the psykers to the general population. There can be no crowds of onlookers, no opportunities for sympathetic family members to attempt rescues, no chance for last goodbyes. The psykers are loaded aboard the shuttles under heavy guard, shackled together in long chains that prevent individual escape attempts while allowing groups to be moved efficiently. The shuttles themselves are purpose-built for this function, armored and windowless craft designed to withstand attack and prevent anyone inside from seeing or communicating with the outside world during transit. From your perspective as a psyker being transferred, the experience is terrifying and disorienting beyond anything you have endured thus far. You are marched from your cell to the loading area in chains, seeing for the first time the full extent of how many others have been collected alongside you. Dozens or even hundreds of psykers are assembled, all shackled together, all radiating fear and despair into the warp in waves that hammer at your consciousness like physical blows. The psychic pressure is almost unbearable, a cacophony of terror that makes it difficult to think clearly or maintain any sense of individual identity separate from the collective anguish surrounding you. You see Sisters of Silence moving among the prisoners, their blank presence creating zones of relative calm wherever they walk, and you feel both relief and revulsion at their approach. They gesture orders with their hands, their meaning clear despite the lack of speech. You will board the shuttles. You will comply with all instructions. Any resistance will be met with immediate and overwhelming force. You are loaded aboard, packed into compartments barely large enough to accommodate everyone. There is no room to sit properly, barely enough space to stand without pressing against the person chained next to you. The shuttles seal shut with a hiss of pressurizing air, and then you feel the lurch of liftoff as the craft begins its ascent. The acceleration presses you into the deck, making it difficult to breathe under the combined weight of gravity and the bodies of those pressed against you. There are no windows, no way to see what is happening outside, but you can feel the ship climbing through the atmosphere, breaking free of the planetary gravity well, entering the void of space where the black ship waits in orbit. The journey seems to last forever, though it probably takes less than an hour. And then another lurch, this one accompanied by the clang of docking clamps engaging and the hiss of airlocks equalizing. The shuttle has reached the black ship. Your journey has truly begun. The doors open, and you are herded out into a vast hangar bay, your first glimpse of the interior of a vessel that will be your prison for weeks or months to come. The Black Ship has claimed you, and there will be no escape from this point forward. Aboard the Black Ships, the journey begins. The interior of a Black Ship is a place designed by necessity and refined through 10,000 years of experience into an environment that serves its dark purpose with brutal efficiency. The moment you step from the landing shuttle into the ship's receiving bay, the atmosphere changes in ways both physical and psychic that immediately communicate the reality of your new circumstances. The air is cold, recycled through ancient life support systems that add a metallic tang to every breath and seem incapable of fully removing the smell of human suffering that permeates every surface. The lighting is dim, provided by lumens that cast everything in shades of grey and shadow, creating an environment where depth perception becomes unreliable and every corner might conceal threats both real and imagined. The architecture is oppressively Gothic, all soaring arched ceilings that disappear into darkness above, and narrow corridors that force people to move in single file, designed to make anyone who walks through these spaces feel small and insignificant. But more than the physical environment, it is the psychic weight of the place that strikes you most powerfully. Thousands of psykers are held within this vessel, confined in cavernous holds throughout the ship's massive hull. Their collective fear, despair, anger, and suffering creates a miasma in the warp that presses down on your consciousness like a physical force, an overwhelming sensation of anguish that you cannot escape or ignore. You can sense them even through the psychically resistant walls and the countless warding symbols that line every surface. It is like standing in a vast chamber filled with thousands of people screaming in terror and pain, except the screaming is psychic rather than audible. A constant background assault on your consciousness that you can never fully tune out. Some psykers collapse immediately upon sensing this, their minds unable to process the magnitude of suffering they are experiencing. Others manage to stay on their feet through sheer willpower, though you can see in their eyes that they are already beginning to break under the pressure. You are processed immediately upon arrival, a dehumanizing procedure designed to strip away the last remnants of your individual identity and prepare you for life as cargo rather than a person. Your clothes are removed and burned, destroyed, to prevent any possibility of smuggling items aboard or maintaining connections to your former life. You are forced through cold water showers, washing away the accumulated filth from your time in the holding facility while guards watch impassively, ensuring you follow all instructions without question. Your head is shaved completely, another measure designed to prevent the spread of disease and to make everyone uniform in appearance. You are given a shapeless grey shift made of rough fabric that provides minimal protection against the cold and offers no comfort or dignity. This is your uniform now, identical to what every other prisoner wears, making you indistinguishable from the thousands of others who share your fate. Most dehumanizing of all, you are assigned a number. It is branded onto your flesh using a hot iron, the pain sharp and immediate, leaving a permanent mark that will identify you even if all other records are lost. This number becomes more important than your name from this point forward. It is how you will be referred to by the crew, how you will be tracked in the ship's manifests, how you will be identified when your fate is ultimately decided on Terra. You are no longer a person with a history, family, dreams, or personality. You are a unit of cargo, valuable but expendable, significant only for what can be extracted from you in service to the Imperium's survival. The psychological impact of this transformation cannot be overstated. You look down at the number burned into your skin and feel something fundamental break inside. The realization that you have ceased to exist as an individual in any meaningful sense settling over you like a funeral shroud. Your psychic signature is also recorded during processing, a baseline reading taken by sanctioned psykers working for the ship's administration. These individuals are themselves products of the same system that now processes you. Survivors of previous journeys aboard the Black Ships who proved strong and stable enough to be trained and returned to service. They probe your mind with their abilities, assessing your power level, the specific nature of your psychic manifestations, and most critically, your resistance to corruption from the warp. The examination is invasive and painful, like having someone rummage through your thoughts and memories without permission, leaving you feeling violated and exposed in ways that physical searches never could. The examiners show no sympathy or warmth. They have conducted these assessments thousands of times and will conduct thousands more. You are just another psyker in an endless stream, deserving neither cruelty nor kindness, simply requiring efficient processing so the ship can continue its operations. After processing, you are marched into the holds, the vast cargo bays where psykers are confined for the duration of the voyage to Terra. These holds are massive spaces, cavernous chambers that could contain entire city blocks, divided into sections by barriers of the same black, psychically resistant metal that forms the ship's hull. Each section is designed to contain several hundred prisoners, while preventing the psychic energy of one group from cascading into others and potentially triggering catastrophic incidents. You are released into one of these sections, and the barriers seal behind you with a finality that makes clear there will be no leaving until the ship reaches its destination, or you die, whichever comes first. The holds are organized chaos. Hundreds of psykers crowded together with minimal privacy and almost no comfort. The floor is bare metal, cold enough to leach warmth from your body if you sit on it for too long. Sleeping platforms are stacked in tiers along the walls, simple shelves barely wide enough for a human body, with thin blankets that provide inadequate protection against the persistent chill. There is a constant background noise, a murmur of voices, crying, arguing, praying that never fully stops. Some psykers sit alone in corners, lost in their own thoughts or visions, their eyes unfocused and their expressions blank. Others cluster in small groups, seeking comfort in human contact, even as they fear each other's powers and the possibility that anyone around them might lose control at any moment. Fights break out regularly, violence erupting suddenly when stress and fear boil over into action, people lashing out physically or psychically at those around them simply because they cannot contain their emotions any longer. The Sisters of Silence patrol the holds regularly, their presence immediately quelling any disturbances through a combination of their null aura and sheer physical intimidation. They do not need to speak or even threaten violence explicitly. The moment they appear, everyone present feels their psychic void, that terrible absence that feels like a piece of reality has been excised, and the terror this inspires in psykers is profound and immediate. It is like being plunged into ice water combined with the sensation of suffocation, as if some vital part of yourself has been suddenly cut off. Prisoners who were fighting moments before separate immediately, pressing themselves against the walls or floor in attempts to maximize distance from the sisters. Those who are too slow to cease their disturbances, or who are judged to have caused sufficient disruption, are removed from the general population, dragged away to isolation chambers, or in extreme cases, simply executed on the spot if the sisters determine they represent too great a risk to contain safely. Food is distributed twice daily through automated systems built into the walls of each section. At designated times, panels slide open to reveal trays of reconstituted protein paste, nutrient bars, and cups of recycled water that tastes faintly of chemicals, no matter how much it has been filtered. The food is calculated to provide the minimum nutrition necessary to maintain life and basic health, but nothing more. There is never enough to feel truly satisfied, leaving you in a constant state of hunger that adds to the general misery of your circumstances. The meals do serve one positive function. They provide structure to days that would otherwise be undifferentiated passages of time impossible to track. You count meals instead of hours or days, marking the passage of time by the number of feeding periods you have survived rather than any conventional measurement. Sanitation facilities are communal and utterly inadequate for the number of people using them. Privacy is non-existent. You relieve yourself in the presence of dozens or hundreds of others. all dealing with the same basic biological needs under conditions that would be considered inhumane for animals on most civilized worlds. Disease spreads easily in these conditions, despite the ship's attempts at maintaining basic hygiene through automated cleaning systems and mandatory health screenings. Respiratory infections, gastrointestinal illnesses, and skin conditions pass through the population in waves, affecting dozens or hundreds of prisoners at a time. Medical care is minimal and provided only for conditions that threaten your ability to survive until Terra. If you fall ill with something minor, you simply endure it without treatment. If your condition worsens to the point where you might die or infect too many others, you are removed from the general population. No one knows precisely what happens to those who are removed for medical reasons. They simply disappear and are never seen again, leaving the rest of you to speculate about whether they were treated and isolated until recovery, or whether removal is simply a euphemism for quiet execution of those too ill to be worth the resources required to maintain them. The psychic environment within the holds is nightmarish in ways that non-psykers cannot fully comprehend or appreciate. You are surrounded by hundreds of individuals whose emotions and fears bleed constantly into the warp, creating a storm of psychic energy that batters at your consciousness every waking moment. Every spike of terror, every wave of despair, every burst of anger creates ripples in the immaterium that you sense with uncomfortable clarity. The result is an overwhelming psychic static that makes it nearly impossible to think clearly or maintain any sense of individual mental boundaries. You feel other people's emotions as if they were your own, experience their nightmares while you sleep, sense their thoughts and fears pressing against your consciousness like physical pressure. Some psykers build mental walls, attempting to block out this constant assault, retreating into themselves and severing as much psychic contact with their surroundings as possible. Others lose themselves entirely, their consciousness fragmenting under the pressure until they become little more than empty shells, whose bodies continue functioning, but whose minds have been effectively destroyed. The ship's wards and the psychically resistant hull provide some protection, dampening the psychic emanations and preventing them from reaching critical mass that might tear holes in reality or attract demonic attention from the warp. But the protection is not perfect, and occasionally something breaks through the defenses. A psyker loses control, their powers manifesting in an uncontrolled burst of energy. Fire erupts from nowhere, consuming the unfortunate individual and potentially spreading to those around them. Objects fly through the air as telekinetic abilities activate without conscious direction. Reality itself seems to ripple and distort as the barrier between the materium and the immaterium thins dangerously in a localized area. When these incidents occur, the response is immediate and brutal. Sisters of Silence rush into the affected area, their null presence suppressing psychic activity through sheer proximity. The psyker responsible is subdued, usually through violence, and removed from the hold. In many cases, they are executed immediately, their body burned to ash to prevent any possibility of the incident contaminating others. Time aboard a black ship becomes strange and difficult to track, despite your attempts to count meals and mark days. There are no windows to mark the passage of day and night, no natural light or darkness to indicate circadian rhythms. The lumens never change in intensity, maintaining the same dim illumination at all hours. Your subjective experience of time begins to distort, minutes feeling like hours or hours passing in what seems like minutes. This temporal confusion is exacerbated by warp travel, which the ship must engage in to transit between star systems. When the vessel enters the immaterium, the normal rules of time cease to apply. A journey that should take weeks by conventional physics might be completed in days within the warp, or it might stretch on for what feels like months, despite only days passing in real space. Your memories themselves become unreliable. Events you clearly remember happening yesterday might actually have occurred a week ago or an hour ago, and you have no way to verify which is correct. The Black Ship does not travel directly to Terra after collecting you and the others from your world. Instead, it continues its circuit, visiting other planets to collect their tithes as well. Each stop follows the same pattern. The ship enters orbit around a world, shuttles descend to collect waiting prisoners. New psykers are processed and added to the holds, and the ship departs for its next destination. You watch as the population in your section gradually swells, new faces appearing regularly, each one bringing their own stories of discovery, capture, and terror. Some of the newly arrived are children, young people whose powers manifested early and who were taken from their families before they could fully understand what was happening to them. Others are elderly, individuals who successfully hid their abilities for decades before finally being discovered. Each arrival brings a temporary spike in the psychic pressure as the newcomers adjust to the overwhelming environment, and their fear adds to the collective anguish that permeates the hold. At each world the ship visits, you see new variations on the same fundamental story playing out. Some of the new prisoners come from civilized hive worlds like your own, arriving relatively healthy, if traumatized by their experiences in local holding facilities. Others come from feral or primitive worlds, arriving in worse physical condition, bearing scars from abuse by populations that still practice ritual mutilation or torture of suspected witches. A few come from wealthy or highly developed worlds, arriving in better health and sometimes even with belongings or documentation that the guards confiscate during processing. Regardless of their origins, they all share your fate now, all reduced to the same status as numbered cargo being transported to Terra for judgment and probable death. The voyage continues, day after day, meal after meal, with conditions in the holds gradually deteriorating as more prisoners are added and the strain on the ship's life support and sanitation systems increases. The air becomes noticeably more foul. The water tastes increasingly of chemicals. Disease outbreaks become more frequent and affect larger percentages of the population. The psychic pressure intensifies with each new arrival, the combined fear and suffering of thousands, creating a miasma so thick it feels like you are drowning in other people's anguish. You begin to understand why the crew requires such stringent mental screening and regular rotation. Merely existing in proximity to this much concentrated suffering would break most people within days. That you have endured it for weeks or months is either a testament to your mental resilience or evidence that you are gradually being broken in ways too subtle to recognize, until the damage is irrevocable. The circuit. Collection. Across the stars. The black ships follow established routes through the Imperium, circuits that have been refined over millennia to maximize efficiency while accounting for the practical limitations of warp travel and the necessity of visiting worlds in orders that make logistical sense. Each circuit might encompass dozens or even hundreds of star systems, taking months or years to complete, depending on the distances involved and the specific worlds that must be visited. The ships operate on schedules measured in centuries rather than years, with each world expecting a visit approximately once per 100 standard years, though this timing varies enormously based on local factors and the complex logistics of managing a tithe system that spans an entire galaxy. Some worlds see black ships multiple times within a single generation due to high rates of psychic manifestation or strategic importance. Others might go 2 centuries between visits, isolated by distance or deemed low priority by the administrators who plan these routes. The journey between worlds is accomplished through warp travel, the only practical means of covering interstellar distances in anything less than generations of real space flight. The ship's navigator, one of the rare mutants whose third eye allows them to perceive the currents of the Imperium, guides the vessel through that nightmare realm using the Astronomicon as a reference point. This is extraordinarily difficult and dangerous work under the best circumstances, requiring constant vigilance and the ability to interpret psychic phenomena that would drive normal humans insane through mere exposure. For navigators aboard black ships, the challenge is compounded by the cargo being carried. The thousands of psykers held in the holds create a beacon-like effect in the warp, making the ship far more visible to predators and hostile entities than it would otherwise be It is like trying to navigate through shark-infested waters while bleeding from multiple wounds. Every moment bringing the risk that something dangerous will be attracted by the psychic emanations and attack. The ship's Geller fields provide protection during warp transit, generating a bubble of real space around the vessel that prevents the denizens of the Imperium from directly manifesting aboard. But the fields are not perfect, especially when strained by the psychic presence of thousands of untrained psykers whose fear and despair weaken the barriers between dimensions. Things press against the fields from outside, testing for weaknesses, seeking any gap they can exploit to break through and access the treasure trove of souls being transported. You can sense these entities even through all the protections in place, feel their alien hunger and malevolent intelligence as they circle the ship like predators stalking wounded prey. Some prisoners claim to hear voices during warp transit, whispers that promise power, freedom, or revenge if they will only open themselves to the gifts being offered. These voices come from the demons beyond, attempting to corrupt individuals and use them as anchor points to breach the Geller fields. The smart prisoners know to ignore these whispers, to recite prayers to the Emperor, and close their minds to the temptations being offered. Many have been warned explicitly by the Sisters of Silence or crew members about the dangers of listening to anything you might hear during warp travel, but some are too desperate or too broken to resist. They reach out to the voices, accepting whatever bargains are proposed in hopes of escaping their circumstances or gaining power to fight back against their captors. When demonic possession occurs aboard a black ship, the results are catastrophic and the response is immediate. The moment a psyker shows signs of possession, whether through physical transformation, manifestation of clearly demonic abilities, or simply behavior that indicates their consciousness has been overwhelmed by something from beyond, they are terminated without hesitation or attempt at exorcism. Sisters of Silence converge on the affected area, their null presence weakening the demon's hold on reality, while their weapons end the possessed individual's life as quickly as possible. The body is immediately incinerated using flamers or dedicated cremation equipment, reducing it to ash that cannot serve as an anchor point for the demon, even if fragments of the entity remain attached to it. The area where the possession occurred is subjected to intensive cleansing, blessed by priests, rewarded with fresh protective symbols, and monitored carefully for any signs that corruption might have spread to other prisoners, or even the ship itself. These incidents terrify everyone in the holds who witnesses them, providing visceral demonstrations of exactly why the Imperium fears untrained psykers and treats them with such brutality. You see a fellow prisoner consumed by possession, watch their body twist into something that should not exist, as the demon wearing their flesh attempts to break free, and you understand with perfect clarity that you are one moment of weakness away from suffering the same fate. The knowledge is paralyzing, making you hyper-aware of your own mental state and terrified of any unusual thought or sensation that might indicate corruption taking root in your consciousness. Between warp transits, the ship travels through real space, using conventional drives to approach and depart from worlds, maneuver within star systems, and navigate around obstacles or threats. These periods provide temporary relief from the intensified psychic pressure of warp travel, though conditions aboard remain terrible by any objective standard. The crew uses these intervals to conduct maintenance, treat prisoners who have fallen ill, and prepare for the next collection. You are occasionally allowed out of the holds in small groups for supervised exercise in larger chambers, opportunities to move and stretch muscles that have been confined to cramped spaces for weeks or months. These exercise periods are closely monitored by guards and Sisters of Silence, with any sign of trouble resulting in immediate return to the holds and potential punishment. But they provide precious psychological relief, brief respites from the overwhelming psychic pressure of being crowded together with hundreds of terrified psykers in spaces too small to accommodate them comfortably. During one of these exercise periods, you might encounter psykers from other holds, individuals whose sections have different exercise schedules that occasionally overlap with yours. These brief contacts, allow you to learn about conditions in other parts of the ship and to hear rumors about what awaits you on Terra. The stories you hear are contradictory and probably unreliable, colored by fear and wishful thinking, and the psychological need to believe that some meaning or purpose justifies the suffering you are enduring. Some prisoners speak optimistically about opportunities for training and service, positions as sanctioned psykers or astropaths that will allow you to redeem yourself through dedication to the Emperor. Others whisper darkly about sacrifice and consumption, about feeding the Golden Throne and the Astronomicon, though the exact numbers of those sacrificed remain shrouded in secrecy and conflicting accounts. You have no way to verify which stories are true, which are exaggerations, and which are simply fabrications created by minds beginning to fracture under impossible strain. The ship's circuit might include stops at regional staging posts, massive orbital facilities that serve as collection points where black ships from multiple routes converge to transfer cargo, exchange information, and prepare for the final journey to Terra. These staging posts are among the most heavily fortified locations in the Imperium outside the Sol system itself, protected by defensive platforms, naval patrol groups, and extensive sensor networks designed to detect threats before they can approach. The concentration of black ships at these locations creates psychic disturbances powerful enough to be detected from light years away, and Chaos forces have been known to launch major attacks attempting to capture or destroy the facilities. These attacks are invariably beaten back, but they add to the danger and uncertainty of the journey. Your time at a staging post is brief, measured in hours rather than days. The prisoners are not allowed to disembark. Additional security measures are implemented, with more Sisters of Silence deployed throughout the holds, and the ship's wards reinforced in preparation for the final leg of the voyage. You sense other black ships nearby through your psychic abilities. Feel the presence of tens of thousands of additional psykers, all experiencing the same terror and suffering you have endured. The psychic weight of so many tortured souls concentrated in one location is almost unbearable, pressing down on your consciousness like the weight of an ocean. Some prisoners break entirely at this stage, their minds unable to withstand the accumulated trauma of weeks or months of imprisonment, combined with the overwhelming psychic pressure of the staging post. They descend into catatonia or madness, becoming empty shells that must be carried or dragged when it is time to move them. The authorities make note of these individuals, marking them as unstable or compromised, assessments that will influence their eventual fate when Terra is finally reached. As the journey continues and the ship draws closer to the Sol system, you begin to notice changes in the behavior of both crew and prisoners. The crew becomes more focused and professional, their movements more precise, and their vigilance increased as they prepare for arrival at humanity's throne world. The prisoners grow quieter, the constant background noise of conversation and argument giving way to a heavy silence as everyone contemplates what awaits them. Some turn to prayer, reciting liturgies to the Emperor and begging for mercy, or at least a swift end to their suffering. Others become withdrawn, retreating into themselves and ceasing all interaction with those around them. A few maintain their composure and humanity through sheer force of will, determined to face whatever comes with dignity, even if they cannot face it with hope. The final warp transit before Terra is the most dangerous and psychologically taxing of the entire journey. The ship must navigate through some of the most heavily traveled regions of the Imperium, routes used by countless vessels making their way to and from the throne world. The psychic turbulence is intense, creating experiences that blur the line between reality and hallucination. You see visions of things that might be memories, might be prophecies, or might be demons, wearing familiar faces in attempts to lower your psychological defenses. You hear voices of dead family members or friends, calling out to you from beyond death, sometimes pleading for help and sometimes screaming accusations that you abandoned them. These experiences are universally disturbing and frequently traumatizing, leaving prisoners questioning their own sanity and wondering if anything they perceive can be trusted as real. And then, finally, the ship transitions out of the warp for the last time, emerging into real space at the edge of the Sol system. The change is immediately noticeable even to non-psykers, a sudden cessation of the background wrongness that has characterized warp travel. For psykers, the sensation is far more dramatic. You feel the presence of Terra itself, sense the Emperor's vast psychic power burning like a star at the heart of the system, perceive the Astronomican's light filling the Imperium with radiance that drowns out lesser sources of psychic energy. It is beautiful and terrible simultaneously, inspiring awe and terror in equal measure. You are approaching the throne world, drawing close to the God Emperor himself, and whatever fate awaits you will be decided in the shadow of the greatest being humanity has ever produced. The journey is nearly complete. Your arrival is imminent, and everything you have endured thus far has been merely preparation for the judgment that is about to be rendered on your soul. Arrival at Terra, the throne world. The Sol system is unlike any other location in the galaxy, a place where humanity's long history and the Imperium's vast power are made manifest in ways both magnificent and terrible. As the black ship enters the system's outer reaches and begins its slow approach toward Terra, you sense the throne world's presence long before the ship reaches orbit. Even if you lack the ability to see through the hull or access viewing ports, your psychic senses perceive Terra as a nexus of power in the warp, a concentration of psychic energy so intense it creates ripples felt across half the galaxy. The Emperor sits at the heart of this maelstrom, his consciousness so vast and powerful that it dwarfs every other psychic presence you have ever encountered. The Astronomican burns like a second sun, its light visible in the Imperium to psykers and navigators across inconceivable distances, a beacon that guides ships safely through the warp's treacherous currents. But beneath these sources of awe-inspiring power, you sense something else, something darker and more disturbing that becomes clearer as the ship draws nearer. You feel the echoes of sacrifice, the psychic death screams of millions of psykers who have been consumed to fuel the Imperium's great works. These echoes never fully dissipate, lingering in the warp like bloodstains that can be sensed by anyone with the ability to perceive psychic phenomena. Layer upon layer of anguish and terror accumulate, creating a psychic landscape that is simultaneously holy and horrifying. You understand, in that moment, the true scale of what the Imperium does to maintain itself, the price paid in innocent lives to keep the Golden Throne functioning and the Astronomican burning. It is knowledge that cannot be unlearned, a truth that fundamentally changes your understanding of the empire you were taught to revere without question. The approach to Terra takes days, the black ship following carefully controlled trajectories through a system crowded with defensive installations, traffic control stations, and countless other vessels arriving from or departing to every corner of the galaxy. The Sol system's defenses are layered and redundant, designed to prevent any conceivable threat from reaching humanity's cradle world. Battle stations the size of cities hang in orbital configurations around every major planet, their weapons powerful enough to reduce battleships to expanding clouds of plasma. Patrol fleets larger than most sector navies maintain constant vigilance, investigating anything unusual and prepared to respond to threats with overwhelming force. Sensor networks monitor every object above a certain size threshold, tracking trajectories and identifying vessels through their transponder signals or physical characteristics. The black ships receive priority clearance through all of this defensive architecture, their sacred cargo granting them passage that would be delayed or denied to other vessels. But even with priority status, the journey inward takes time as the ship maneuvers through designated corridors and waits for authorization to proceed to each successive checkpoint. During this final approach, conditions in the holds deteriorate further as the accumulated stress of the journey reaches its peak. Prisoners who have maintained their sanity through weeks or months of confinement begin to break, the knowledge that their fate will soon be decided combining with the psychic pressure of Terra's proximity to overwhelm their remaining psychological defenses. Fights increase in frequency and violence. More prisoners descend into catatonia or active madness, requiring intervention from the Sisters of Silence and removal from the general population. You finally get your first glimpse of Terra itself when crew members, or more privileged prisoners, speak of what they have seen through viewing ports, descriptions that filter through the holds as whispered conversations and half-believed rumors. They describe a world that bears almost no resemblance to the paradise of ancient legend. Terra's oceans have been drained or built over, covered by structures that transform what was once a water world into a uniform grey sphere. The continents are invisible beneath endless layers of construction, hive cities, and administrative centers stacked upon one another in formations that stretch kilometers into the thin atmosphere. The Imperial Palace dominates the landscape, sprawling across what was once the Himalayan mountains, covering an area larger than many continents on other worlds. Its architecture defies comprehension, a mixture of every style and tradition humanity has produced across 30,000 years, all merged into something both magnificent and overwhelming. The ship does not land on Terra's surface. Instead, it approaches one of many orbital stations that ring the throne world, massive constructs dedicated specifically to processing the constant stream of psykers arriving aboard the black ships. These stations are cities unto themselves, housing the infrastructure necessary to handle tens of thousands of prisoners every day. You are transferred from the black ship via shuttle once more, herded aboard transport craft with the same brutal efficiency that has characterized every stage of your journey. The shuttle descends from the ship toward the processing station, and through small ports or descriptions from others, you catch fragmentary glimpses of holy Terra spinning below, the world that billions across the galaxy pray toward, but will never see, now visible to you only because you are being brought here to be consumed in service to the being who rules it. The processing station is vast beyond comprehension, its interior consisting of miles of corridors and chambers dedicated to various stages of evaluation and sorting. You are unloaded from the shuttle into a receiving bay that dwarfs even the enormous holds of the black ship, a space so large that the far walls disappear into haze and distance. Thousands of psykers are being processed simultaneously, streaming through different channels based on their age, apparent power level, and preliminary assessments made during the journey. The noise is overwhelming after the relative quiet of the holds, a cacophony of voices shouting orders, prisoners crying or praying or screaming, machinery humming and clanking as it performs its designated functions. You are processed once again, subjected to another round of the dehumanizing procedures that have marked each transition in your journey. Medical examinations are conducted, quick assessments designed to identify anyone who is actively dying or carrying diseases that might spread through the station's population. Those who fail these examinations are removed immediately, taken to isolation areas where they will presumably receive treatment, or perhaps simply be left to die, depending on the severity of their conditions and the authorities' judgment about whether they are worth saving. The rest of you are sorted into groups based on criteria you do not fully understand, categorizations that seem to involve your age, your physical condition, and information from assessments conducted during your time aboard the black ship. The sorting process is where you first begin to understand that not all psykers who arrive at Terra will face the same fate. You see some groups being directed toward what are clearly better facilities, areas with cleaner conditions and less obvious security measures. These appear to be individuals judged potentially suitable for training, psykers whose power and stability mark them as possibly worth the investment required to turn them into useful servants of the Imperium. Other groups, including the one you find yourself assigned to, are directed toward more secure areas, places where the security is visibly tighter and the atmosphere more oppressive. You realize with growing dread that preliminary judgments have already been made about your suitability for training, that your fate may have been decided weeks or months ago, based on assessments you barely remember undergoing. You are housed temporarily in dormitories within the processing station. Spaces that are marginally better than the holds of the Black Ship, but still far from comfortable. There are actual beds rather than simple platforms, thin mattresses that provide some cushioning even if they offer little actual comfort. The air is cleaner, processed through more effective filtration systems that remove most of the smell of human suffering that characterize the ship. Food improves from barely adequate to merely unpleasant, simple meals that provide actual nutrition, even if they remain bland and unappetizing. These small improvements are enough to kindle hope in some prisoners, who interpret better conditions as evidence that they will be selected for training rather than sacrifice. Others recognize these improvements for what they are: the Imperium, ensuring its raw materials are in acceptable condition before beginning the real work of processing them. You spend days or possibly weeks in the processing station, time once again becoming difficult to track despite improved conditions and more regular schedules. During this period, you undergo the first level of serious evaluation conducted by specialists who actually understand what they are examining. Sanctioned psykers employed by the Adeptus Astra Telepathica probe your mind with their abilities, assessing your power level, your specific manifestations, and most critically, your resistance to corruption from the warp. These examinations are invasive and uncomfortable, leaving you feeling violated in ways that physical searches never could. The examiners are thorough and professional, showing neither cruelty nor compassion, simply performing their duties with the efficiency of long practice. Based on these evaluations, prisoners are divided into broad categories that will determine their ultimate fates. You watch as the strong and stable are separated from the general population, marked for possible training as sanctioned psykers who will serve in various roles throughout the Imperium. A larger group, those with moderate power and reasonable stability, are designated as potential candidates for astropath training, the backbone of the Imperium's communication network. The largest group by far consists of those judged too weak, too unstable, or too compromised to be useful in direct service. These individuals are marked for other purposes, primarily as fuel for the Astronomicon, or sacrifices to sustain the Golden Throne. They are given special designations in their files, tags that seal their fate as surely as if they had already been executed. When your own evaluation results are delivered, read from a data slate by an adept who does not look at your face while speaking. You feel a complex mixture of emotions that you cannot fully process. You have been designated as a potential candidate for astropath training. This means you are judged strong enough to be worth preserving, to receive the extensive instruction necessary to control and direct your abilities for service to the Imperium. But it also means you will undergo soul binding, the ritual that will permanently alter your mind and body, almost certainly leaving you blind and possibly causing other forms of neurological damage. The thought fills you with both terror and a strange kind of hope. You will have a purpose, a role to play in the Imperium's functioning. If you survive the ritual, you will have value beyond merely being consumed as fuel. It is not much, but after everything you have endured, it is enough to cling to. You are transferred once more, this time to shuttles that will carry you down to Terra's surface and the facilities of the Scholastica Psychana, where your training will take place. The journey down through Terra's atmosphere provides your first and likely only opportunity to actually see the throne world with your own eyes, rather than through psychic senses or second-hand descriptions. The view is simultaneously magnificent and horrifying. You see the Imperial Palace rising from the surface like a mountain range of human construction, its spires reaching into the upper atmosphere, its bulk covering an area that dwarfs continents. You see the endless sprawl of hive cities, billions of people packed into structures so vast they create their own weather patterns. You see the industry that feeds this concentration of humanity, manufactorums and processing plants covering entire regions, their outputs measured not in tons, but in megatons. The shuttle lands at a facility on the outskirts of the palace complex, a massive structure that serves as one of the main campuses of the Scholastica Psychana. This is where you will spend the next years of your life, assuming you survive the training and the soul-binding ritual that awaits at its conclusion. As you are marched from the shuttle into the facility, processed one final time, and assigned to quarters in one of the training dormitories, you allow yourself to feel something approaching relief. The journey is over. You have reached Terra. The black ships have delivered you to your destination, and while you do not know what awaits you in the days and years ahead, at least you are no longer confined to those terrible holds, no longer subjected to the endless suffering of the voyage across the stars. You are at the beginning of something new, and though you suspect that what lies ahead will be its own form of torment, for now you simply appreciate the fact that one nightmare has ended, even as another is about to begin. Testing and evaluation, Judgment Day. The Scholastica Psykana is not a single institution, but rather a vast network of facilities spread across Terra, each dedicated to different aspects of psyker training and evaluation. The main campus where you have been taken is among the largest, a sprawling complex capable of housing and instructing thousands of students simultaneously. The architecture is ancient, dating back to the earliest days of the Imperium, showing its age in ways both beautiful and disturbing. Gothic spires rise toward the grey Terran sky, their surfaces covered in religious iconography and the names of honored dead. Interior spaces alternate between grand halls with soaring ceilings and claustrophobic corridors, barely wide enough for two people to pass. Everything is maintained with obsessive care, but there is a sense of decay nonetheless, of systems straining under loads they were never designed to bear, of infrastructure that should have been replaced centuries ago, but continues functioning through maintenance rituals and desperate improvisation. Your first days at the Scholastica are spent in orientation, a process designed to break down whatever psychological defenses you manage to maintain during the journey and rebuild you as a servant of the Imperium. You are taught the history of the Adeptus Astra Telepathica, learning how the organization was founded by the Emperor himself during the early days of the Great Crusade. You are instructed in the importance of the work psykers perform when properly trained and controlled, shown examples of how astropaths have prevented disasters through timely warnings, or sanctioned psykers have turned the tide of crucial battles. You are told repeatedly that you have been granted an honor most psykers never receive, the opportunity to serve rather than simply being consumed as fuel. The instructors emphasize this point constantly, attempting to instill gratitude for your circumstances, even as they subject you to conditions that would be considered abusive in any other context. The instructors themselves are sanctioned psykers, who survived their own training and rose through the ranks to positions of authority. They view their students as raw materials to be shaped, valuable resources that must be processed efficiently to maximize their utility to the Imperium. They are not deliberately cruel, but neither are they kind. They waste no time on comforting words or attempts to ease your transition from prisoner to student. You are given your schedule, your assignments, and detailed rules governing every aspect of your life within the facility. Violations of these rules are punished swiftly and harshly, ranging from extra duties or reduced rations for minor infractions to physical discipline or even termination for serious offenses. You are expected to maintain discipline at all times, to control your abilities even under stress, to demonstrate absolute loyalty to the Emperor and the Imperium. Anything less is considered evidence of weakness or corruption, grounds for immediate removal from the training program and reassignment to the population destined for sacrifice. The training itself is grueling in ways both physical and mental, pushing you to limits you did not know you possessed, and then demanding you push further. You spend hours each day in meditation, learning techniques for controlling your connection to the warp and preventing unwanted manifestations of your abilities. The meditation practices are drawn from traditions thousands of years old, refined through generations of trial and error into forms that have proven most effective for most psykers. You learn to visualize your mind as a fortress, constructing mental walls that separate your consciousness from the constant background noise of the warp. You practice focusing your awareness on single points, maintaining concentration so intense that external distractions cease to register. You study the nature of the Imperium itself, learning to recognize the signs of demonic presence and the methods for resisting corruption. Practical exercises follow the theoretical instruction, opportunities to actually use your abilities under controlled conditions. You start with simple tasks, moving small objects with telekinesis or projecting simple thoughts to instructors who receive them telepathically. The exercises gradually increase in complexity and difficulty as you demonstrate competence at each level. You learn to maintain your abilities under stress, performing tasks while subjected to loud noises, painful stimuli, or psychic interference designed to disrupt your concentration. You practice for hours at a time until exhaustion makes further work impossible, then rest briefly before resuming training. The instructors push constantly, testing your limits, forcing you to use your abilities until you are drained of energy and can barely think straight. They explain that only by pushing yourself to the breaking point repeatedly can you learn where your true limits lie and how to function effectively even when drained. The psychic tests you undergo are designed to measure not just the strength of your abilities, but their nature and character. The Scholastica maintains detailed classification systems for categorizing psychic manifestations, taxonomies developed over millennia of experience with thousands of psykers. Some individuals are primarily telepaths, able to read minds and communicate mentally across distances. Others manifest as telekinetics, moving objects with thought. Still others show abilities related to pyrokinesis, electrokinesis, prophecy, healing, or dozens of other specialized forms of psychic power. Your specific manifestations are catalogued meticulously, each ability measured and recorded, building a comprehensive profile of your capabilities and limitations. This information will ultimately determine your suitability for various roles and influence whether you are trained as an astropath or directed toward other forms of service. Testing also focuses heavily on measuring your resistance to the predators of the warp. Demons seek constantly to breach the barrier between the immaterium and real space, and psykers represent their primary avenues of access to the material universe. A psyker who cannot resist demonic temptation or whose mind can be easily overwhelmed by psychic assault is worse than useless to the Imperium. They are active threats whose continued existence endangers everyone around them. To test your resistance, you are exposed to progressively more intense psychic pressures, designed to replicate the kinds of assaults you might face from hostile psykers or demonic entities. Sanctioned psykers attack your mind directly, attempting to break through your defenses and dominate your will. You are shown images and visions calculated to provoke fear, anger, or despair, emotions that demons use as hooks to gain purchase in your consciousness. In the most extreme tests, you are even exposed to carefully contained minor demonic presences, entities that have been bound and warded so thoroughly they cannot escape but can still attempt to corrupt anyone who comes near them. These tests are extraordinarily dangerous and are conducted only under the most stringent security conditions, with Sisters of Silence standing ready to intervene. You are brought into a chamber where the bound demon waits, separated from it by psychic wards and physical barriers, but still close enough to sense its malevolent presence. The entity attempts to communicate with you, offering power, knowledge, freedom, anything it thinks might tempt you into lowering your defenses. You must resist these temptations while maintaining your mental discipline, proving that you possess the strength of will necessary to withstand corruption, even when directly confronted by the forces of chaos. Your reactions to these tests determine whether you are judged suitable for continued training. Those who show signs of weakness, whose minds are too easily penetrated, or who respond to demonic temptation with anything other than absolute rejection, are marked as compromised and removed from the program. Those who maintain their resistance but show insufficient power or control are similarly failed out, judged unsuitable for roles requiring direct psychic abilities. Only those who demonstrate both power and stability, who show they can resist corruption while still manifesting their abilities effectively, are allowed to continue. The attrition rate is high, with perhaps half of those who enter the training program failing to complete it. These failures are not returned to their homeworlds. They are reassigned to the populations destined for sacrifice, their brief hope of service replaced by the certainty of death. During the months of testing and training, you begin to understand the scale of what the Scholastica does and the terrible calculus that governs its operations. The Imperium needs psykers desperately, requires them for communication, navigation, military operations, and countless specialized roles that only individuals with psychic abilities can fulfill. But the vast majority of psykers born across the Imperium are simply not strong enough or stable enough to serve in these capacities. They lack the raw power, or they lack the willpower, or they manifest abilities that are not useful for the Imperium's purposes. These individuals still have value, but not as living servants. Their value lies in what can be extracted from them, the psychic energy that can be drained away to fuel the Emperor's great works. It is a brutal reality, and one the authorities make no attempt to hide. You are told explicitly that you are fortunate to have been selected for training, that you have demonstrated qualities marking you as worthy of investment. But the selection is conditional. Failure at any point will result in reassignment to the ranks of those destined for the Astronomicon or the Golden Throne. The psychological toll of this knowledge weighs heavily on everyone undergoing training. You are constantly aware that your performance during any given exercise might determine whether you live or die, whether you will have a future or be consumed like fuel. The stress manifests differently in different students. Some become obsessively focused on their training, driving themselves to exhaustion and beyond in desperate determination to succeed. Others develop nervous habits, physical tics, or compulsive behaviors they cannot control. A few crack entirely, suffering psychotic breaks that result in immediate removal from the program and likely execution when they manifest dangerous abilities without control. You cope by trying to maintain emotional distance, focusing on the technical aspects of training rather than dwelling on the stakes involved. But the knowledge is always there in the back of your mind, coloring everything you do. As your training progresses, you are given more information about what comes next for those selected as astropath candidates. The soul-binding ritual is described in clinical terms by instructors who have themselves undergone the procedure. They explain that you will be taken deep into the Imperial Palace, to sacred chambers beneath the Golden Throne, where the Emperor's presence is strongest. There, in groups of approximately 100, you will kneel before the Master of Mankind, and he will reshape your mind, linking a portion of his vast psychic power to your own. The ritual provides protection against demonic corruption, amplifies your telepathic abilities to levels impossible through training alone, and marks you forever as one who has been touched by divinity. But the cost is terrible. Almost all who undergo soul binding are blinded by the experience, the overwhelming psychic energy searing their optic nerves beyond any hope of repair. Many suffer additional neurological damage, losing senses or experiencing chronic pain. Some do not survive at all, their minds or bodies unable to withstand the transformation. The exact survival rate is not disclosed, though the instructor's somber tones suggest the casualties are significant enough that you should prepare yourself for the very real possibility that you might not survive the ordeal. You are terrified of this approaching ordeal, but you are also determined to face it with as much courage as you can muster. You have come too far, endured too much, to falter now. The alternative to undergoing soul binding is reassignment to the sacrifice pools, a fate you have decided is not acceptable. You will survive the ritual. You will become an astropath in service to the Imperium. You will find purpose and meaning in your assigned role. These thoughts sustain you through the final phases of training, through the intensive preparation for soul binding that includes weeks of fasting, prayer, and meditation designed to purify your mind and strengthen your will. And finally, After what feels like an eternity, but is probably only 6 to 8 months since your arrival on Terra, you are informed that the day has come. You and 99 other students have been selected for the next soul-binding ceremony. You will be taken to the Imperial Palace. You will meet the Emperor. Your fate will be decided. The testing is complete. The moment of transformation has arrived. The paths of service for the chosen few. Not all psykers who survive the journey to Terra and the brutal testing regimen of the Scholastica Psychana are destined to become astropaths. A select minority, those individuals judged to possess exceptional power combined with ironclad willpower and psychic manifestations, particularly useful for combat or specialized applications, are marked for different training programs. These chosen few represent perhaps 1 or 2% of those who arrive aboard the black ships, survivors of a selection process so rigorous that merely reaching this point is an achievement worthy of recognition. They are separated from the general student population and transferred to specialized facilities where they will undergo training as sanctioned psykers, who will serve the Imperium in various military and administrative capacities throughout the galaxy. The training for sanctioned psykers is different from, and in many ways, more demanding than the preparation for astropaths. Where astropath training focuses primarily on developing telepathic abilities and maintaining mental discipline under psychic assault, sanctioned psykers must master combat applications of their powers and learn to function effectively in battlefield environments where stress and danger are constant. They study techniques for projecting psychic lightning that can smite enemies at a distance, creating force barriers to protect themselves and their allies, or using telepathy to detect ambushes and read enemy intentions. They practice maintaining their abilities while under fire, while wounded, while subjected to sensory overload from the chaos of battle. The attrition rate for sanctioned psyker training is even higher than for astropaths, with many students failing not because they lack power, but because they cannot maintain control when terrified or in pain. Those who successfully complete this training will be assigned to various roles throughout the Imperium's vast military apparatus. Many become primaris psykers, attached to Astra Militarum regiments, serving alongside normal soldiers and providing psychic support that can turn the tide of battles. These individuals can incinerate enemy formations with focused psychic fire, create defensive barriers that deflect enemy shots, or use their telepathic abilities to coordinate attacks with perfect timing. They are valued assets, but also deeply feared by the soldiers they serve alongside, viewed as necessary evils whose presence is tolerated only because the alternatives are worse. The life expectancy of a battlefield psyker is measured in months rather than years, their powers making them priority targets for enemies who understand that eliminating the psyker can cause the collapse of entire defensive lines or offensive operations. Other sanctioned psykers find employment with the Inquisition, that shadowy organization dedicated to rooting out heresy, corruption, and Xenos infiltration wherever they are found. The Inquisition actively recruits psykers from the Scholastica Psychana's graduating classes, looking for individuals who combine power with intelligence and the specific character traits that make effective investigators and enforcers. Those selected become acolytes serving under established inquisitors, learning the craft of investigation while providing psychic support for their master's work. A fortunate few may eventually rise to become inquisitors themselves if they demonstrate the necessary combination of ability, dedication, and ruthlessness. These individuals wield authority that supersedes that of planetary governors and military commanders, empowered to requisition any resources they deem necessary and to order the deaths of billions if they judge that chaos corruption or Xenos infiltration has progressed too far to be countered through conventional means. The very strongest sanctioned psykers, those vanishingly rare individuals whose power and purity both reach exceptional levels, may be offered the opportunity to join the Grey Knights, the chamber militant of the Ordo Malleus dedicated specifically to combating demonic threats. The Grey Knights are space marines, transhuman warriors whose bodies have been extensively modified through gene seed implantation and surgical enhancement, but they are also all potent psykers whose abilities are carefully cultivated and directed toward the destruction of chaos in all its forms. The selection process for the Grey Knights is extraordinarily demanding, requiring not just exceptional psychic ability, but also the physical characteristics necessary to survive the transformation into a space marine and the absolute mental purity required to face greater demons in combat without succumbing to corruption. Of the thousands of psykers processed through the Scholastica Psychana each year, perhaps a handful prove suitable for recruitment by the Grey Knights. For those who do, the rewards are significant. They become some of the most dangerous warriors in the galaxy, capable of confronting and banishing demonic entities that would slaughter entire companies of normal space marines. For the vast majority of psykers who pass the initial testing, however, the path leads to astropath training and eventual soul binding, rather than these more specialized roles. The training regimen for prospective astropaths typically lasts several years and focuses almost exclusively on developing telepathic abilities while minimizing manifestations of other psychic powers that might interfere with communications work. You learn to project your thoughts across distances, starting with simple mental communication within the same room, progressing to building-wide transmission, and eventually learning techniques for sending messages across the void of space itself. You learn to receive telepathic communications from others, filtering signal from noise in the chaotic psychic environment of the warp and interpreting messages that may have been distorted or corrupted during transmission across vast distances. You study the Emperor's Tarot, an ancient system of divination that astropaths use both for fortune-telling and as a sophisticated encoding system for transmitting complex information. The tarot consists of numerous cards, each representing different concepts, entities, or events relevant to the Imperium. By describing the arrangement and relationships of cards in a reading, an astropath can convey detailed intelligence about military situations, political developments, or emerging threats without using language that might be intercepted and understood by enemies. Mastering the tarot requires memorizing not just the meanings of individual cards, but the subtle variations of interpretation that can occur based on their positions, relative to each other, and the context in which the reading is performed. It is a complex art that takes years to learn properly, and even experienced astropaths sometimes disagree about the precise interpretation of particularly ambiguous readings. The preparation for soul binding intensifies as you near the end of your training. You are taught specific prayers and meditations designed to strengthen your mind. For the ordeal ahead, mental exercises that supposedly increase your chances of surviving the Emperor's touch. You learn about the history and significance of the ritual, how it was first developed during the Great Crusade as a means of protecting psykers from demonic corruption while enhancing their abilities to serve the Imperium's expanding empire. You are told stories of great astropaths from Imperial history, legendary individuals whose timely warnings prevented disasters or whose encrypted messages carried vital intelligence that changed the outcomes of entire campaigns. These tales are meant to inspire you, to provide examples of what you might achieve if you survive the ritual and dedicate yourself to your work with appropriate diligence and faith. But the stories also serve to emphasize the responsibility you are taking on, the understanding that countless lives may depend on your ability to transmit messages accurately across the vast distances that separate the Imperium's scattered worlds. A message delayed or garbled in transmission could result in reinforcements arriving too late to save a besieged world. Intelligence about an enemy fleet's movements that is corrupted during transmission could cause Imperial forces to be deployed to the wrong location, leaving crucial systems undefended. The stakes are immense, and the consequences of failure can be measured in millions of lives lost and entire sectors falling to enemy control. You are being trained not just in technical skills, but in the understanding that you will become a vital component of the communications network that binds the Imperium together. Without astropaths, Interstellar coordination would be impossible, and without coordination, the Imperium would fragment into isolated worlds, each facing its enemies alone. The final preparation involves a period of purification lasting several weeks, a process designed to ready both your body and your spirit for the soul binding. You are moved to special chambers within the Scholastica where you will undergo fasting, prayer, and ritual cleansing. Your diet is reduced to simple grains and water, just enough nutrition to sustain life, but leaving you in a constant state of hunger and physical weakness. You spend long hours each day in prayer, reciting liturgies praising the Emperor and begging for his blessing and protection during the upcoming ritual. You undergo ritual bathing in water that has been blessed by priests, symbolically cleansing your body of impurities while meditating on the significance of the transformation you're about to undergo. The combination of hunger, exhaustion, and constant religious instruction leaves you in an altered mental state, your consciousness existing in a space between waking and dreaming, where the boundaries between self and other, between material and immaterial, seem to blur. This altered state is intentional. The authorities believe it makes you more receptive to the Emperor's touch, more likely to survive the soul binding without your mind shattering from the intensity of the experience. Whether this belief is accurate or simply a rationalization for practices that serve primarily to break down your psychological resistance is unclear, but the effects are undeniable. By the time the purification period ends, you have been reduced to a state of near total submission, accepting whatever fate awaits you with a combination of faith, resignation, and simple exhaustion too profound to allow for continued resistance. You no longer question. You no longer fear in the active sense of trying to avoid what is coming. You simply exist in a state of passive acceptance, waiting for the ritual that will either transform you into a servant of the Imperium or kill you in the attempt. Finally, after weeks of preparation, the day arrives. You and approximately 99 other prospective astropaths are robed in simple white garments, the first clean clothing you have worn since arriving on Terra, and formed into a procession that will carry you from the Scholastica Psycana toward the heart of the Imperial Palace. The journey takes many hours, leading you through corridors and chambers of increasing grandeur and antiquity. You pass through security checkpoints guarded by Adeptus Custodes, the Emperor's personal guardians, warriors whose transhuman might surpasses even that of Space Marines. These golden-armored giants observe your procession, with eyes hidden behind ornate helms, their presence radiating an aura of power and authority that makes it clear they could end your entire group in moments if they judged it necessary. You traverse halls whose walls are covered with the names of the honored dead, billions of individuals who gave their lives in service to the Imperium over its 10,000-year history. You see relics from the Great Crusade displayed in sealed cases, weapons wielded by legendary heroes, and fragments of armor worn by Primarchs, the godlike sons of the Emperor who led humanity's expansion across the galaxy before half of them fell to chaos. The weight of history presses down on you, making you feel infinitesimally small in the face of such accumulated glory and sacrifice. Everything that has come before, all the countless trillions who lived and died to bring the Imperium to this point, seems to culminate in this moment as you approach the chamber where the Emperor himself awaits to judge whether you are worthy of his blessing or merely another soul to be consumed in service to his eternal war. The final descent takes you deep underground, through levels that predate the Imperium itself, built during the dark age of technology when humanity first reached for the stars. The air grows warmer as you descend, heated by the energy output of vast systems whose purposes have been forgotten, but which continue operating through the devotion of tech priests who maintain them without fully understanding their functions. And beneath the physical heat, you feel a different kind of warmth, a psychic presence so powerful it makes your skin prickle and your mind ache with the effort of remaining focused. You are approaching the Golden Throne. You are drawing close to the Emperor himself. The moment of transformation is at hand, and whether you survive it will depend on strength you hope you possess, but cannot be certain of until you are tested beyond all limits of endurance. For those psykers judged unsuitable for training, whether due to insufficient power, unstable willpower, or manifestations deemed too dangerous or too weak to be useful, a different fate awaits. These individuals, representing the vast majority of those collected by the Black Ships, are not simply executed or discarded. The Imperium is pragmatic in its brutality, and even those psykers who cannot serve as living assets still possess value in death. Their psychic energy, the very essence of their souls, can be harvested and directed towards sustaining the two greatest works that keep the Imperium functioning: the Astronomicon, the great psychic lighthouse that guides ships through the warp, and the Golden Throne itself, the ancient mechanism that keeps the Emperor's consciousness anchored to the material universe. The Astronomicon is perhaps the single most critical installation in the entire Imperium, second in importance only to the Golden Throne, from which it draws its ultimate power. It is a massive psychic beacon that projects its light across roughly 50,000 light-years of space, covering approximately half the galaxy. This light, visible to navigators and other psykers within the Immaterium, serves as a fixed reference point that allows ships to navigate the treacherous currents of the warp with some measure of reliability. Without the Astronomicon, interstellar travel would become exponentially more dangerous and time-consuming, with vessels forced to rely on local landmarks and known safe routes, taking months or years longer to complete journeys that currently take weeks. The breakdown of reliable navigation would effectively fragment the Imperium, severing the connections between worlds and leaving each planet isolated and vulnerable. The beacon itself is housed within the Hollow Mountain, a vast complex built into Terra's crust beneath the Imperial Palace. According to Imperial records, the Astronomicon is powered by the combined psychic efforts of 10,000 psykers, working in carefully coordinated shifts to maintain continuous operation. These individuals are inducted into the Adeptus Astronomica, a specialized branch of the Adeptus Astra Telepathica, dedicated solely to maintaining the beacon. They undergo training in techniques for channeling their psychic energy into the beacon's ancient machinery, learning to direct their power with precision rather than manifesting it in the uncontrolled ways that characterize untrained psykers. The process of serving in the Astronomicon is gradual but inexorable. The psykers are integrated into the beacon systems, their minds linked together in a vast psychic choir whose combined strength is amplified and focused by the Emperor's own power into the concentrated beam that shines forth into the warp. The work is exhausting beyond measure, draining their life force steadily as days become weeks and weeks become months. Records suggest that approximately 100 psykers die each day from the strain of powering the beacon, their bodies failing as their psychic energy is completely consumed. When death comes, the body is removed and incinerated, and another psyker from the waiting reserves takes the fallen one's place, maintaining the beacon's operation without interruption. The Golden Throne's requirements are less well documented, but apparently no less demanding. The ancient device was originally constructed to serve as humanity's gateway into the webway, the network of stable tunnels through the warp that the Elder have used for millennia. When that project was sabotaged during the Horus Heresy, leaving a permanent breach that only the Emperor's psychic might can keep sealed, the throne's purpose changed from gateway to prison. It now serves to keep the Emperor's consciousness functioning and to maintain the psychic barrier preventing demons from pouring through the webway breach into the heart of the Imperial Palace. The exact number of psykers sacrificed daily to maintain the throne's operation varies by source, with estimates ranging from 1,000 to several thousand, though these numbers remain deliberately obscure. What is known suggests the sacrifice process for the Golden Throne is more rapid than service in the Astronomicon. Psykers are brought to chambers deep beneath the throne, places where proximity to the Emperor's vast psychic presence is overwhelming, even through all the shielding and wards. The Emperor's consciousness, whether through deliberate action or simply the passive hunger of a being struggling to maintain his existence, draws upon the psychic energy of these souls, consuming them to sustain his own continued function. The process apparently takes hours rather than months, with the psyker's life force drained away rapidly until nothing remains but empty husks that are removed and disposed of, while new sacrifices are brought forward to continue feeding the insatiable requirements of the ancient mechanism. For a psyker who has been judged insufficient for training, learning that you have been marked for sacrifice is a devastating moment. The hope that sustained you through the testing evaporates, replaced by the certainty that your life will be measured in the time it takes for your energy to be extracted. Some find solace in faith, convincing themselves that their sacrifice serves the Emperor directly, and that their souls will find peace in his presence after death. Chaplains and priests are available to provide spiritual counseling, helping you accept your fate as a holy duty rather than a death sentence. Others resist until the end, raging against the injustice of being born with abilities they never asked for and being consumed for circumstances beyond their control. But resistance changes nothing. The machinery requires feeding, and you are the fuel it has selected. The journey to the chambers where sacrifice occurs is conducted with more ceremony than most of what you have experienced thus far. You are cleaned, given fresh robes, and allowed a final meal. Prayers are spoken over you, blessing your sacrifice and commending your soul to the Emperor's care. And then you are led down into the depths, into spaces where the very air seems to hum with psychic energy, where you can feel the Emperor's presence growing stronger with each step. The fear is overwhelming, but so too is a strange sense of awe. You are approaching the God Emperor himself, drawing close to the being whose will has shaped human history for 10,000 years. In your final moments, you sense something vast and ancient and impossibly powerful. Consciousness so immense that your individual mind is like a candle flame before a star. And then that consciousness touches yours, and everything ends. Conclusion and reflection. The black ships represent one of the darkest necessities of the Imperium of man, a system that processes hundreds of thousands of psykers annually through a pipeline that ends in service or sacrifice for the vast majority. From the moment of discovery on your homeworld, through the brutal conditions aboard the collection vessels, to the final judgment on Terra that determines whether you will be trained or consumed, every step reinforces the same message. You are not a person with rights or dignity, but a resource to be exploited for the survival of humanity as a whole. The system operates with mechanical efficiency, refined over 10 millennia, grinding through generation after generation of psykers without pause or mercy. Yet, for all its brutality, the system exists for reasons the Imperium considers valid and indeed essential. Every untrained psyker represents a potential catastrophe, a doorway through which demons might enter real space and unleash devastation that could kill millions. Every psyker who serves as an astropath or sanctioned psyker provides capabilities that the Imperium desperately needs to maintain coordination across its million worlds. And every psyker sacrificed to the Astronomicon or the Golden Throne provides the psychic energy necessary to keep those critical installations functioning. From the cold calculus of the Imperium's leadership, the suffering of individuals is acceptable when weighed against the survival of the species. Whether that calculation is morally justified is a question the Imperium does not permit its citizens to seriously contemplate. What happens when you are taken by the black ships, then, is that you become caught in machinery vast beyond comprehension, your individual fate determined by factors largely beyond your control. Your innate power level, your strength of will, the specific nature of your psychic manifestations, and sometimes simply luck. All play roles in whether you are selected for training or marked for sacrifice. If you are fortunate enough to survive training and soul binding, you will emerge as something changed fundamentally from what you were, your mind reshaped by forces beyond normal human understanding, your senses altered or destroyed entirely, but gifted with abilities and purpose that provide meaning even amid the suffering you have endured. If you are among the majority who are deemed unsuitable for service, your end comes more swiftly, but serves purposes you are told are no less vital to humanity's survival. The comfort of meaning, the reassurance that your death serves the Emperor and helps preserve humanity across the stars, may or may not provide solace as you face the end. But meaning or no, comfort or none, the end comes regardless, and the machinery moves on to process the next group of terrified psykers being herded aboard the black ships somewhere in the galaxy's vastness. The grim darkness of the far future admits no easy answers and offers no gentle fates for those born different from the masses. The black ships sail on, eternal in their purpose, collecting the witches and the cursed from a million worlds, delivering them to Terra, where judgment awaits. This is what happens when you are taken by the black ships. This is the price the Imperium demands. This is the reality that psykers face in an empire that values survival above all else, even above the lives and suffering of those who serve it. Thank you for watching this exploration of one of Warhammer 40,000's darkest subjects. If you found this deep dive valuable and want to see more lore examinations from the grim darkness of the far future, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. Until next time, may you never manifest the witch's gift, and may the Emperor's light guide you through the darkness.